Hey guys, so I am doing one of those videos that I had done maybe a couple weeks ago where I talked about the 10 larger eyeshadow palettes that I would keep. Today I'm talking about smaller eyeshadow palettes. I asked you guys if you'd be interested in that, and many of you requested that video. So instead of 10, I'm doing 12. Because I narrowed it down to 12 and I just couldn't narrow it down any further. So we're doing the 12 small eyeshadow palettes that I would keep. And considering how many small eyeshadow palettes I have to say I'm pretty proud of myself that I could even get it down to 12. Let's go ahead and start with the one that's on my eyes. So this is one of the Pat McGrath Blitz Astral quads, and this is the one in Ritualistic Rose. I love this one. I love this one the most out of the three that she came out with. And I mean, I just love this full stop. It is 4 colors of her like special shades, which if you have any of her Mothership palettes, those are the 4 shades that are on like the right side of the palette. They're baked, they're very, very unique. They have just such an interesting finish. And in the Mothership palettes, those 4 special shades really are complementary to the 6 other shades that are in the palette. And I always thought, every time I opened up a Mothership palette, I always thought, gosh, if she just did a quad of those, like what color stories would she come up with? And all 3 of these Blitz Astral quads are just, they're just perfection. I love the color story that she came up with these 4 quads because I find they work really, really well on their own, but they're also really great as kind of like an auxiliary palette to maybe some matte shades that you may have and you just kind of want to spice it up with something. But I love this one in particular. I don't necessarily need like a matte shade in my eye look. I am very happy to use all shimmers, which is what I did today. I basically have these 3 shades on. I have these 2 basically on my lid, and I tapped this one just kind of in the center of my lid there just to give it a little bit more of like a golden pop. I love the eye look that I get every single time I use this one. So this is definitely a keeper for me. All right, next up are 3 Tom Ford quads. And I decided to only talk about quads that are still available. Otherwise, this entire list would have been Tom Ford quads. So there are Tom Ford quads that I love, but that have been long discontinued or recently discontinued, like the Cognac Sable, like the Cocoa Mirage. So I just decided not to mention any palettes that aren't available anymore, just to kind of stick to present day and what's available to us. So I do have 3 Tom Ford quads to talk about. So the first one is Body Heat. This one is of that wet dry formula, and this to me is just such a perfect everyday kind of neutral palette. I can just use these 2 shades if I want to do something simple. If I want to make it a little bit smokier and deeper, I can throw this shade in there. Or if I just want to make it a little bit warmer, a little bit spicier, I can throw this kind of like earthen terracotta shade in there. I love this formula. I love these like 4 shades in here together. Just love this one. Body Heat is definitely one of my all-time faves from Tom Ford. The next one is Noir Fume, and this one is one of the newer quads from Tom Ford, and it's my favorite of the newer quads. I just love the kind of like sexy, smoky, sultry kind of look that I get from this quad, because no matter what kind of accent shade I use, you know, every shade except for this one, I just end up with a smoky kind of look. I just can't get away from something kind of like sultry with this palette, and I really, really like that about this one. It's just such a great go-to. If I want to do something easy, but maybe I'm going out in the evening, or maybe I just want to look a little bit more fetching, I'll reach for this palette. So that's the Noir Fume. And these are not the wet dry formula. All of these are of like the more kind of typical pressed powder formula. And then the third one I picked is the Honeymoon palette. This one has been around for a long time, and this is of the wet dry formula. I think this is maybe when he introduced the wet dry formula to the quads. So, so gorgeous. I was kind of debating between this one, Nude Dip, and Double Indemnity. And I had Double Indemnity in here for a while, but this one is just, it's so special because of the shades. I love this shade in here. This one is just so rich, but it has like a little purpley tinge to it. It's just such a fun palette, like without it being like over the top. I just feel like it can be worn every day. I feel like I've worn it during the daytime, I've worn it in the evening. It always seems appropriate, and this is just an old time favorite of mine. So this is Honeymoon from Tom Ford. So those are the 3 Tom Ford quads that I picked. That was difficult. That was a challenge in and of itself to narrow it down just to those 3. So let's move on to some other favorites here. This one was probably the first palette that came to mind when I thought about small palettes. And when I'm talking about small palettes, I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning. I just considered anything that had 8 pans or less. I don't know. I just threw that out there just to kind of like give myself some parameters. Anyway, this palette from Natasha Denona, the Camel palette, this is so good. This is so good. This went with me on a lot of trips where I was like, I don't know if I'll be wearing that much makeup. If I need makeup, I don't know what I'll need it for. And it worked out for me on so many trips. I just brought this one along. And because it has 3 matte shades in there, and then it just has this satiny like champagne color in here, you get these really nice kind of like basic looks, but they look really just rich, you know, just like Natasha Denona kind of like eyeshadows where the pigmentation and the colors, they're not necessarily like overly pigmented, but they're very, very rich. They're very creamy on the lids. And any eye look I've done from here, you know, I can just do something very simple with these two. I can make it a little bit smokier with this one. This one gives it a lot more, you know, shimmers. So it's great for like evening. It's just so easy to use. It's so beginner friendly. It's so appropriate for so many different occasions. So I just absolutely love this palette. This is probably one of my all-time favorite Natasha Denona palettes, like big or small. I just love this Camel palette. So this one is number 5. And then let me mention this one because I kind of showed it in my Armani video, but I didn't end up using it because I have 2 of these quads, but I think this is the quad that I would actually grab if I had to. And this is the number 2 Avant Premiere quad from Giorgio Armani. So these quads came out, I want to say last year sometime. They completely redid the design of them and they reformulated these shadows. So they're very, very creamy. They're, you know, easy to work with. I feel like I'm going to be saying the same things over and over again for all of these because I love them all. But they do all have a lot of the same qualities, which is easy to use, which I think is so important, especially for like a quad. For me, when you open up a quad, it has to be like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do with this. And that kind of ends up being your go-to look. But then, you know, the more you use it, the more you find that like there's different ways that you can like place the colors or whatever, and you end up being able to make just 4 shadows very, very versatile. And I found that with this one. I think it was really easy to just go in, you know, inner corner, add some dimension, use one of these as like a transition shade. But because this one is cooler and this one is warmer, you do get like right there 2 different looks, very distinct different looks. And you can just kind of forego this one and just use one of these 2 shadows just all over your lid. That's another 2 looks in here. So I love quads like this where I just feel like they surprise you in like how many different ways you can use it. And with something so kind of, you know, neutral and relatively, you know, quote unquote boring looking, you end up with like a lot of options to choose from. So that is the Avant Premiere from Armani Beauty. Love it. And of course I had to mention a Chanel quad, and there were 2 that I wanted to mention, but they were limited edition, not available. So I was like, let me not mention those. So this is the one that is still available that I absolutely love. This is the Clair Obscure number 308 quad. And this is just a straight up neutral toned, natural eye quad. This is like the no-brainer quad. The quad if you're like someone who's like, I just need some eyeshadow to kind of like look presentable when I go to work, but I really don't care that much. This is the one for you. It's a beautiful formula. It's really creamy. It's very, very easy to use. It's neutral, so it'll go with like any lip color, any blush color, any hair color you may be rocking that day, you know, outfits. Like it just works with absolutely everything. So this is one of those eyeshadow palettes that I feel like just, you know, kind of takes like a back seat. It gives you like a nice polished eye look, but your makeup look isn't about this palette. This is the one that I reach for often if I have like a really bold lip color on. I don't really like to have a bold eye and a bold lip. I really like to pick one or the other. So if I have like a really bright red or orange red, you know, those colors that I really like for spring, summer, this palette and like this palette, these are the palettes that I reach for. So that is the Chanel Clair Obscure number 308. All right, we are down to the last 5. Let me talk about yet another neutral lover's dream, but this is the very first Viseart Petit Pro palette. And when they came out with this, I was like, OMG, this is genius. You have 4 mattes, 4 shimmers, and it's tiny. This is like business card size. and perfect for travel, and also perfect for those people who just maybe had always wanted to try Viseart shadows but never really had the chance. The larger 12 pan like professional palettes are maybe either a little limiting, or since they're geared towards professionals, maybe you don't want, you know, a palette with all mattes or all shimmers. You kind of want to like mix it up. This was the perfect kind of like gateway drug for the consumer to get into Viseart, because you could try their matte, you could try their shimmers, see what you like, and you have like all of the neutral tones that you could possibly need. This was the palette that I always took to travel, kind of before like the Natasha Denona Camel one came along. I would pack this one because no matter what look I needed to do, whatever the occasion, whatever outfit I was wearing, this one always seemed to work because I could just use this as a transition and I could amp it up with any of these colors, all of which are very different. We have gold, we have this like warm copper, we have this burgundy, all different tones, all different levels of warmth. Just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I would use this shade as eyeliner, so I wouldn't even have to bring like a pencil with me. There's a little mirror in there, and as we know, the Petit Pros have become very popular and they've come out with many, many different color stories. But this first one is still my favorite because it's so basic. It's so basic, and I feel like it just covers a lot of territory. All right, I've got one Charlotte Tilbury in here. I at one point had 4, but I kind of had to like mix and match and kind of like switch around my options, obviously. So this is the one that I was left with because this one I just find, it's special. It's special to me. I really like green. So this is the new Rebel palette, or I think they've even renamed it again to the Green Lights palette, but I love the colors in here. Again, I really like greens. I really like these kind of like dirty kind of green colors, these scummy green colors, and I love the formula of this palette. This one is so good. All of the shades are so smooth and creamy and easy to blend and easy to lay down on the lids, and just, oh, they work like a dream. And the colors, even though they look kind of like similar in the pan, like these three look very, very close in the pan, they're not, as you can tell by the swatches. Like there's so much more brown in this one, there's so much more green in this one, and you don't see that until you get it on your lid, and it's always like this nice like kind of surprise every time I use this palette. So this one I absolutely love from Charlotte Tilbury. All right, we're down to the last 3. So I'm gonna mention this one. This is the only duo I have in my list here, but this is the Chantecaille Le Chrome Luxe Eye Duo, and this is in the shade Tibet. I have a feeling these are either being sold out and kind of not being restocked, or they're kind of redoing these shadows. I hope they don't do anything to the formula. I hope they keep this formula because it is so amazing. I have, I think, 3 of these, and this color story happens to be my favorite, but I love the Grand Canal also. Anyway, I will mention this just right off the bat. The compact for this stinks. It doesn't like close. All 3 of mine are like this. Like it doesn't like snap close. I don't know. It's very strange. And it is very, very large for just these 2 shadows. I mean, these 2 shadows are big. I think the width of this compact is great, but they really don't need so much space for these applicators. Anyway, now I'm getting nitpicky, but these shadows from Chantecaille are so, so gorgeous. The shine that they give off, the smoothness. These I think are just kind of like a baked shadow. They almost have like a cream-like appearance, or they have that appearance like if you were to wet your brush with like Fix Plus and then go into a shadow, you know how it just makes it so much like smoother and amps up the shine. These look like you've done that to the eyeshadow already. They're just absolutely gorgeous. So again, I don't know what Chantecaille is doing with this whole duo line, but I hope they're not discontinuing it because these are some of my favorite eyeshadows. They're just stunning. Okay, and the last 2 I have are from Victoria Beckham. So I have Tuxedo, which is just a neutral lover's dream. As you guys probably noticed, I really like neutral shadows, especially when it comes to smaller palettes, because I feel like that's kind of the purpose of them. The larger shadows, I feel like you have the space and the room to like add different colors and add like fun colors or whatever. But when you only have like room for 4 shadows in one palette, I feel like you have to be really judicious with like the shades that you pick. And I'm just such a sucker for just these like everyday kind of neutral shadows. So this one is absolutely wonderful if you're looking for kind of like a cool toned look. All three of these are kind of like a demi matte, and then this one has like a little bit more of like a satin shimmer to it. Very, very pretty. I tend to just use like these two colors in here. I'll throw this on like my brow bone if I need something like that, but I really like these two shades, and then if I need to, I'll use this one kind of like as eyeliner. It's just such a sophisticated, chic, simple kind of look, kind of palette. So I picked Tuxedo, and then I picked the new Silk one. I was hesitant about this because it's new and I feel like I need time to bond with my makeup, but this one is just, it's really, really pretty. And I picked this over like the Tom Ford Suspicion, and someone actually pointed out that they thought this looked very similar to the Chanel, is it the Code Elegant Quad? I'm not the biggest fan of that Chanel Quad formula. That one is more of like a baked, and it's dusty. I feel like when I swatch it, it looks really beautiful, but when I get it on my lid, it's very, very powdery and it's very, very dusty. So those Chanel quads, that kind of formula is not my favorite. And then I picked this over Suspicion because I just liked the softer look that this gave. You know, I'm going to reach for this one much more than the Suspicion because it is a softer look. And I feel like with all the shimmer and with like these different like metal tones, like this gold, this copper, that I prefer something just a little bit softer. I just really preferred this look on my eyes versus the Suspicion. So that is the Victoria Beckham Silk Smoky Eye Brick. And that is the last pick for me. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What are some of your favorite smaller sized palettes? I obviously could have made this list like my top 50 because I have a lot more smaller palettes than I do larger palettes. It's something I never really thought about, but I have a ton, a ton of quads, as you guys know. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video.